There's a decoration I bought from my mother that is hanging on our door to leave the apartment. And on that decoration is a quote. The quote is, "It's okay not to be okay." What's up, everyone? My name is Tyler Adolfo. I'm 27 years old, soon to be 28. On the December 24th, I will be 28. I can't believe it. Time is flying by. So, and I have a diagnosis of bipolar type 1 with psychotic features, which has presented many challenges in my life, but I'm not going to talk about that specific illness in this video. Instead, I want to draw attention to some of my thoughts and ideas about this notion that we need to have everything figured out at all times, or we need to have everything figured out ever. One of the things that comes to mind when I think about having everything figured out is this feeling of being behind. There's been a plethora of moments in my life where I've felt behind. I'm sure many of you could relate to some extent. In my case, I feel like it's a little more extreme because I was in high school until age 21. That's because I had a dropout period and then returned to high school. And so, of course, my freshman year of college, I was also older than my freshman counterparts in my freshman classes. And now I'm 27. I still don't have my bachelor's degree. All my friends who went to college got their bachelor's degrees at age 22, and I see on LinkedIn what they're accomplishing in their lives, and I see on Facebook what they're accomplishing beyond the scope of their careers. They're starting families, they're raising kids, they're getting married, becoming pet parents, and I'm a pet parent too. I got a cat. Someday I'd like to own a dog, but we'll see what life has in store for me, see if it's part of God's plan for me. But this feeling of being behind, I feel like it's a natural feeling for people to experience because all of us are in a rush all the time. And if you need proof of that, just go on the road and look at how hectic people drive. I go to the crosswalk all the time, and the amount of time I have to wait for someone to be courteous enough to stop, slow down so that I can cross is kind of ridiculous. But that's because we're always in a rush at all times because we don't want to be behind, right? We want to be punctual. You have to graduate high school at 18. You have to get your bachelor's at 22. You have to go to college. You have to learn a trade. You have to do things the way that society expects you to do them. And that is unhealthy. I want to emphasize that we all follow our own timeline. And a part of that involves this idea of uncertainty. It's a significant component of being human, is uncertainty. When I started my journal in 2016, in my first entry are the words fear, doubt, and uncertainty, because those are the words that encapsulated my thoughts at the time. And that particular word, uncertainty, still weighs heavily on my shoulders quite often. And I think it's because there's just every moment in my life, even when I've had established routines, there was really no knowing what was going to transpire next. When I was in high school doing speech competitions, Lions Club Youth Speech, which by the way, that video is on my channel if you want to check it out. Second video I ever posted, it's my performance at the state finals of the Lions Club Youth Speech Contest. The contest began with 900 speakers, and I ended up as one of the 5 state finalists. But I digress. Even when I was in that practice of speaking competitively, there was this uncertainty. Would I advance to the next round? Would I stumble when I go on stage? Would I forget what I had memorized? Would I deviate from what my speech actually was? We face this in school in the setting in terms of when we take a quiz or a test, we ask ourselves, What grade will we get? Will I get an A again? Will I fail this test again? Am I going to fail for the first time? Am I going to do average and get a C again even after all that work I put in? These are the kind of questions we face, and it's because of uncertainty. And then in the workforce, we face these same questions. When am I going to get that promotion? Will I ever get a promotion? Why is this other person getting the promotion over me? We're uncertain as to why. Uncertainty is a significant component of life. We have to acknowledge that, because the first step in solving a problem is acknowledging that a problem exists. We have to come to terms with the reality that uncertainty is there. And although it's not always particularly problematic, if we delude ourselves into believing that we could have certainty in life at all times, then we're going to set ourselves up to be disappointed, and that's the last thing we want. I think one of the things we need to do when thinking about having everything figured out is oftentimes we fail to give ourselves credit for things that we achieve. I struggled with attendance a lot in my high school years. There were periods of times though where I was consistent and I would make 18 consecutive days, which may sound ridiculous to you, but when you consider the fact that there had periods of time where I also missed 18 consecutive days, it is an achievement to have that level of consistency, which is made possible by stability, which I've had at times and have not had many other times. We need to give ourselves credit for what we accomplish. If we improve an aspect of our lives, give yourself credit for what you improved. Your diligence and commitment is what made that possible. Never forget that, and never surrender hope. And when you give yourself credit, you're more likely to be hopeful. You're more likely to be hopeful about the prospect that you'll achieve something meaningful again in the future, just as you have in a past period. And for all future periods, just looking forward, we have to understand that life is not a straight line. Life is full of bumps in the road, and it can be a roller coaster at times where we peak and grow exponentially in a certain area. And then there's other moments, the ebbs and flows of life, where we just plummet and collapse into total despair. And in that state, under those circumstances, it's hard to maintain hope, but it's imperative that we do. Hope is our ally at all times, without question. We don't always know how things are going to turn out, but what I can promise to you, someday, and I've had this happen many times in my life, someday you'll be proud that you did not give up. You'll be proud of what you achieved. You'll be proud of your progress. You'll be proud of how far you've come compared to where you were. Why did it look like I was about to punch the screen? That was weird, but that wasn't my intention. I'm not trying to punch anyone. Also, I can't emphasize this enough. I've talked about this in previous videos, but small wins matter. Small wins are still wins. Small steps of progress add up to become big steps of progress. So we may not have everything figured out. We might not have the big picture figured out. We might not have the totality figured out. But we can have parts of a whole figured out. And then the next day we could have more parts of that whole figured out. And eventually we'll be closer to having that whole figured out. And someday, in some areas of life, we will have that whole figured out. And there's a whole realm of possibilities that open up when we achieve that state. I would say it's pretty rare for that to happen, depending on the scale of the goals that we enumerate for ourselves and the time that we dedicate to any given task. But I would say it's pretty rare. What's not rare is that we're going to face challenges in life. Think of life as a story. Not every chapter is going to be positive in the story. There's going to be chapters that are dark. And during those dark chapters, we have to maintain our hope. We have to think in terms of, what can I do to contribute to my big picture? I don't have everything figured out, but I don't need to have everything figured out, because as that decoration on the door that leaves my apartment that I got from my mom, wow, that was some sentence. It's okay not to be okay. Wow, I'm on a spree here. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. My name is Tyler Adolfo. Subscribe if you're new. Like the video if you enjoyed. Love, light, and tranquility to all.